let's compare the Nitro Deck to the RetroFlag. So these are both really good contenders if you're in the market for handheld gaming. So the RetroFlag has some really good features. It's got Hall effect sensing joysticks, which to be honest, both of them have. So no drift and pretty much no dead zone as well. Way more accurate than potentiometer sticks. So that's really nice to see. But of course the RetroFlag, you can see, has adopted the GameCube style for the joysticks, and these are not replaceable, so you cannot change these unless you dismantle the whole thing. So you're stuck with the C stick and then like the regular stick here, and some people really don't like the C stick. So this has got like adaptive rumble. If you do like a minuscule thing, it will do small rumble. If you do loads of stuff like shooting a gun, it will be big rumble. And if it does a low rumble output, it whines. You can hear like an electrical whine, but if you've got any game volume on at all, you can't notice it. So that was kind of a con in my review. Face buttons are really nice. I don't dislike these at all. It's got an excellent D-pad, one of the best D-pads I've tested. It's got turbo, so that you can assign turbo to pretty much any button. It's also got button swap, so you can actually swap the order of buttons, which is a really cool feature as well. Yes, it attaches via a USB-C, so you must have wired Pro Controller enabled in the settings for this to work. And it's got like metal sort of indents just here, look like the little clippy things to lock your Switch in place, which is a massive con because it actually scratched my Switch. So that's my Switch OLED, and yeah, it was scratched the rails on either side. Let's go over the next one, the Nitro Deck. So this has the same kind of colored face buttons. They're smaller face buttons, but they feel really nice. I don't dislike them. We've got Hall effect sensing joysticks again, but this time you can actually, you know, change the sticks. So you get some spares in the box and you can change them if you want to, which is really nice. You've got the cracked home button, which has an LED inside it. It still connects via the USB-C, so you still need wired controller on. It's got a really nice D-pad. Then we've got some really nice triggers and bumpers. I like that. Hall effect bumpers as well. Then on the back, everything changes, right? You've got like a scanner. It's basically NFC, but it doesn't support Amiibo. This is just for your phone to scan to log this into their app for collecting it. Then we've got all these back buttons, which is a massive pro, right? It's a massive bonus because you can assign these to whatever you want, and you can assign macros to them as well as button swap. So you can do a lot with this. Then we've got in and out. So this one, you can actually charge it via this port, and out is when you take your Switch out and then put it in the dock. You can use this as a wired controller, essentially. Now we've got the Switch at the base there, and that's because this actually locks the Switch into place. So just down there, if I try and move this up and down, you might not see it, but that is basically, you know, going in and out to lock and unlock the Switch. Oh, and we do have turbo as well on this one, so you can do turbo as well. This has got loads of features. Now let's go over like more of a comparison. So this is what they look like side by side, essentially. You can see the RetroFlag is just a little bit bigger. If I kind of line it up there, I'd say that's roughly lined up. It's just a little bit bigger, and you've got this big old notch on the base because that is where you actually charge it from, right? That is the charging port on the base, whereas this one's got it on the back. So you can see this, the screen will align here, whereas on this one, you've got this big chunky chin on it. So in terms of height wise, I dare say the Nitro Deck is just a little bit taller because of this chin on the base just here. And of course on the back, you know, it's a little bit more sleek on the RetroFlag. You've got a lot going on here with the Nitro Deck. Oh, and I also forgot to say, this has got a stand, whereas of course this one does not, and it doesn't really sit upright either, you know, so this doesn't really stand up, where you can kind of get it to stand up, but this one you absolutely can, because you can stand it up just like that or with the stand. Now you'll see on the RetroFlag we've got like a felt backing here, so that's actually material, whereas on the Nitro Deck we do not have that at all. So this, you know, I like the idea of this, but they've like gone, yeah, let's protect the back, and then given metal rails which scratch your Switch. What are you playing at? I don't know. So that's an instant con from me. Whereas the Nitro Deck, this is fine, you know, providing there's no dirt on here, you're not going to get a scratched Switch. And it's also got these nice like PTFE glide pads on the side to let your Switch dock in really nicely. And we got plastic rails plastic rails that won't scratch your Switch. The other thing is, you can see here, there's some really good vent holes going on here for both the original and OLED model Switch. And we've also got sound cutouts here for the Switch OLED, because the speakers are actually found on the front at the bottom. So this is the OLED, right? That is the speakers just there. And those indents are to make sure that you can hear there, right? Whereas on this one, you don't have that. It doesn't really like cup the bottom either, so it doesn't really need the vents for the OLED, but for the original model, all you get is these two tiny slits. So I never had an issue with my OLED, but I haven't tested with the OG model, so I've no idea if that affects it or not. But in terms of like that, I would give the point to Nitro Deck here for just being a little bit more like accommodating, let's say. The other thing, which is a big thing for me, is the game card slot. Because the RetroFlag one, this was one of my biggest like downfalls, there's no cutout. So when you've got the Switch in there, you have to take the Switch half out to be able to access the game slot. That is so annoying. Whereas on this one, Nitro Deck, they've actually gone, hey look, we've made a dimple just here so that you can still open the game card slot. So you do not need to remove the Switch, which again is just a pro. I almost said a con. It's not a con. Then of course we've both got excellent sticks. There's not really anything to say about these. Now I will say that these on the RetroFlag have more resistance than the ones on the Nitro Deck. The ones on the Nitro Deck are a little bit freer, but I don't dislike either. You know, I actually quite like the extra firm resistance of the RetroFlag, but the fact that you can change out the caps on the Nitro Deck just wins for me. Now the D-pad, I've got to give it to this, you know, to the RetroFlag. The D-pad is just so much nicer, but I say so much nicer, it's a little bit nicer, you know, it's not like massively nicer, it's a little bit nicer. It's mainly because I think they've opted for a full-size D-pad. This thing is monstrously huge and it just feels really nice. Whereas this one is a small one, but it still feels really nice. They're almost comparable. I think the only downside of this is just the size. You can see that the RetroFlag one is just that little bit bigger, and I just prefer it a little bit more. I just do. Now for the triggers and bumpers, unfortunately the RetroFlag, I said this in my review, is inconsistent. They're a little bit mushy. I remember the triggers themselves not actually actuating unless you fully pushed it all the way down. So if you were just light pressing it, it wouldn't actuate. You had to press them all the way down, and that was a really annoying thing for me. And these two bumpers are inconsistent in feel. So yeah, the bumpers and triggers let this down a little bit. But this, the Nitro Deck, has really nice clicky feeling bumpers, and the triggers are soft touch, like, you know, you can feel that they're Hall effect, and they are much nicer. Even though they're only digital, they're much nicer than the RetroFlag. Now let's look at the face buttons, because the face buttons are quite different. On the Nitro Deck, they are small and like glossy, and they are domed. Now these feel really nice to me. I do like the feel of these, and they're all consistent. Like pretty much everything on the Nitro Deck is consistent. The RetroFlag has much larger face buttons, but again, I really like them. Now these are not gloss, they're like more matte feeling, but they're much larger. Let's see if I can flip this around. You can see there the difference in size, and I do really enjoy the RetroFlag ones, but I can't really give a point to like one or the other. I'd have to give a point to both because I do like the buttons on all of them. And the rumble, I would have to give it to the Nitro Deck. Same with the gyro, because the gyro is just that little bit better. The only downside is with these is because they act as a wired pro controller essentially. The gyro's a little bit messed up. Now if you want to see more on that, go watch my review of this one, and I do a whole section as to like why the gyro sucks, so check that out. Next up comes to features. Now this all depends on your personal preference. For me personally, I just prefer the Nitro Deck because of these. You know, the fact that we've got these buttons that support macro, as well as turbo, as well as button swap. So it really depends what you want. You could do anything. You can have turbo, you can have button swap, you can have macros, like it's great. You can assign it to anything, and I love that ability to do so. Now, some of you might not want to use these at all, and of course you could just disable them, because you can do that. Because, you know, some people might be like, oh, well, I'm going to accidentally press them. Well, you know, just disable them, that's fine. You don't need to use them. But for me, the way I hold the system, I can't accidentally press, because I tend to rest things on my pinkies. I don't know why. I've done it ever since I was a kid. I've always held like systems like this, even like Game Boys and Game Boy Advance and stuff. I've always put my pinkies underneath, so that stops me relying on like hand pressure to grip, so I'm not accidentally pressing these back buttons. But you know, that's the thing. This has that ability, as well as the ability of being able to be used as an independent wired controller, right? With this, which again is just a win. Whereas this one, you can't do pretty much any of that. You can button swap, which is cool. So you can reassign buttons to whatever button you want, essentially. But that's about it. Yeah, you've got turbo, but you don't have macro, and you don't have any back paddles. So you're just relying on the standard layout, right? So you can't use this as a wired controller. You do not have any back paddles or any additional buttons. So, you know, for some that might be a con, for others it might not be. For me, it's kind of like, well, I prefer the Nitro Deck because I like using those extra back paddles. For me personally, I do not like using the click sticks, you know, L3 and R3 or whatever they would be called on the Switch, right? That annoys me. When I'm playing and I have to push this in, I end up moving the stick, and then it messes my game up. I don't like that. So reprogramming them to the back paddles just wins. I do that on my Steam Deck as well. And sometimes even like trigger stuff, I just prefer to press it with the back fingers because I'm resting this on my pinkies. It just feels nice, right, for me. But yeah, you can't do that on this, other than the fact that you can swap buttons, but you can't essentially like reassign them elsewhere, if that makes sense. You would still have to press the stick in for the button you'd swapped it for. Does that make sense? So for me, that's a bit of a con. Now, the biggest thing I would say, in my opinion, is how they feel. Now, you can see just even from looking top down, the RetroFlag has a slightly more ergonomic shape than the Nitro Deck. The Nitro Deck is pretty much straight up and down square. Now, for me personally, I like the feel of it. You know, like I do like the feel of it. It's mainly because of this. So it's got a nice big heft and a big grip just there, which is going to give you that nice sort of hand grip just here so that you can really grip onto it like a proper controller. But there is a but, and I say this all the time. This was my like issue with the Asus ROG Ally, my issue with almost every one of these dockable in like Switch things, and just the Switch and Xbox layout in general. Not the controllers. Everyone always has beef with me for the controller. The controllers are fine because they are angled like an arrow. You can get your hands around it really nicely. There's no problem with that. But with these, there is a problem. Look at my thumbs. They naturally rest here, not there, right? You can't even like rest your hand there and then bring your thumb down. My thumb doesn't go that far, so I can't actually reach the stick. So I have to adopt a different grip to then be able to play. So I have to shift this hand down to then be able to get onto this stick. And that's fine. That's not a problem because I can still grip this back piece, right? But that is an issue. It is an issue. If they just swap these around, I'd be more happy pressing buttons down here or adopting a grip for the buttons than I am for the right stick. Unless they angled this out further so that you can really get your hand down there, like the Satisfy Zen Grip Pro, which just wins because this right side is at an angle more than the left side, because this side doesn't need adjusting because this just works fine, right? But this is more like claw grippy, a bit more uncomfortable. So the Nitro Deck, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but the reason I didn't talk about this in my other video, like my dedicated video about this, is because I just find all of them like this. Not just from Nitro Deck, any branded Nintendo Switch sort of Joy-Con alternative that ends up being like this dockable thing has that problem. And even though, as far as the RetroFlag still has that problem, but it's got less of a problem than the Nitro Deck because you can see it's slightly, very slightly angled out more. You can see the joystick is in more from the edge, whereas this one is out a bit further. This one comes in a little bit, and also we've got a swooped out angle for the ergonomics, right? So that is accommodating for your grip, whereas this is just straight up and down. So the Nitro Deck, straight up and down, this one angled, and that directly adopts into your hand feel. So instead of it being like straight up and down, we've got more of an arrow angle like I was talking about a minute ago, so that we can get down to this stick a little bit better. It's still not great. It's still not how I'd want it, because I'd still have to adopt more of like a loose grip on this side to be able to then get to that stick comfortably. I can't like fully grip on and then get down to this stick. It's easier than this one, but it's still not perfect. And that is the biggest sort of con with the Nitro Deck, to be perfectly honest, is just that angle isn't great. You know, it should have been brought out, and yes, it would look silly, but it would feel better. So if they do make a 2.0, if they can get this right side or do it on both sides, whatever, more an angle, that would be excellent. They both do things really, really well, but the last thing I must talk about is build quality. The build quality of the Nitro Deck wins. This is the winner, it really is. It's more widely available with bigger retail chains. So over here in the UK, both Game and Argos, I had to think there, stock this, and that is big. And that to me says build quality, because they will just get them taken back otherwise. The build quality of this thing is excellent. I really like it. Nothing feels rubbish, nothing feels janky, everything just works as it should. I really like it. Whereas this one, the RetroFlag, is not stocked in any retail chain. It's basically just an Amazon-like machine. When I was looking back at my videos of this, other people were saying I've had problems with the triggers sticking, I've had problems with buttons not registering input, I've had this problem, I've had that problem, and I was just like, oh man, the quality control's not there as much as it will be for the Nitro Deck. I personally, if I was going to re-buy one now, I would go with the Nitro Deck. I would. I love the design. I love all the colors and the different collectible stuff they do, and mainly for the build quality issues. If you've got concerns about it, you can buy these from big retail chains. Just take it back and swap it. You can drive there physically, right? Whereas this one, you can't. You have to order it online. And if it sucks or if it's broken, you have to package it back up, send it all out. It's annoying, right? So I have to say that I would go with the Nitro Deck. I would. Even though I find this a little bit less comfortable to hold than the RetroFlag because of everything we discussed earlier, you know, I would now buy one of these, but I love both of them. Overall, this is just better. I do think this is better in every way, but I still have love for the RetroFlag. Oh, and lastly, they're similar in price. This goes for about £50. This one goes for about the 60 mark, I think, going up to like the 90 mark, which then brings you a case and the limited edition colors and stuff. So that's one thing to consider. But like I said, you're paying for the extra build quality, the better like quality control, and the extra features and stuff. You just are. So what do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you not agree with me? Let me know down in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If there's other things you want to know, just let me know down in the comments. And whilst you're there, subscribe, like this video, and check out another video from me and AJ over on the podcast channel where we talk about all things gaming. And then check out another video from me. Or actually, just go and watch the individual videos for these. I'll stick those videos up around my face as well. And then you can look at a more in-depth video at each of these before you make a decision if you're on the fence. Bye.